My father waited until everyone had finished dinner before he explained which daughter mattered financially. We were sitting around my parents' table on a Sunday evening. My younger sister Megan was across from me with her husband Daniel. Mom had just started clearing plates when Dad said, "Leave those for a minute, Diane. There's something we need to talk about." Mom sat down. Dad looked at Megan. "Your mother and I finally updated our estate plan." Megan frowned. "Okay, we decided the house should go to you." She blinked. "The house?" Dad nodded. "You and Daniel have the children. We want it to stay in the family." Then he kept going. Mom's jewelry, their small investment account, whatever savings remained, most of the furniture and sentimental things. Megan stared at him. "Everything?" Dad said. "Basically everything." Then he looked at me. I waited. Finally he said, "Claire, you're not getting anything." "Not less. Nothing." Mom touched my arm. "You don't need anything, sweetheart. You've done so well for yourself." Dad added, "Megan has the children to think about." There it was, the family equation I had heard in smaller ways for most of my life. Megan needs more. Claire will be fine. I said, "Okay." Dad looked surprised. Mom asked, "That's all you're going to say? I understand what you've decided." Dad relaxed. Then, less than a minute later, he reached beside his chair and slid a contractor's estimate toward me. The roof on the family house needed replacing. Total, $18,600. The Dad tapped the page. "We were thinking maybe you could cover $10,000 and we'll figure out the rest." I looked at the estimate, then at Megan, then back at Dad. Why would I repair Megan's inheritance? Nobody smiled after that. Dad's face tightened. "This is still our home." "I know." "Then don't be childish." "I'm not. You just told me the long-term benefit of this house goes entirely to Megan. That's after we're gone." "Exactly. So while you're here, it's your house and your expense." Mom said, "Claire, you can afford to help." That sentence landed beside the one she had said 5 minutes earlier. "You don't need anything. You can afford to help." Same success. Two completely different uses. I folded the estimate and slid it back. "I need to rethink my finances." Dad stared at me. "You've been helping us for years." "Yes. And because you don't like the will, now you stop caring?" That hurt more than the inheritance announcement, because in one sentence, 7 years of voluntary help became an obligation. My name is Claire Bennett. I was 40 when this happened. Megan is 4 years younger than me. Growing up, I never thought my parents loved her more. They worried about her more. Megan was sensitive. I was mature. Megan needed reassurance. I was independent. If I had a problem, Mom usually said, "You'll figure it out." If Megan had the same problem, Mom asked, "What can we do?" For years, I was proud of being the child who could handle things. I didn't understand that competence can become a trap when everyone starts believing you need less because you can carry more. At 17, I wanted to go on a school trip. Money was tight, so I worked weekends and paid most of it myself. The next year, Megan wanted to attend an arts program. My parents found the money. Mom's explanation was simple. Megan really needs this. Need became the word that settled everything. I went to university. My parents did help me. They paid part of my first 2 years and books, probably around $10,000 altogether. I have never denied that. I worked too. I borrowed some. I graduated and built a career in procurement and operations. By 30, I owned a townhouse. By 35, I had moved into a modest detached home. I saved automatically, contributed to retirement, paid off my car early, and kept an emergency fund. I wasn't wealthy. I was disciplined. Inside my family, that difference disappeared. Megan married Daniel and had 2 children. Daniel worked in sales, so some years were better than others. Megan worked part-time. My parents helped them often, more toward the wedding than planned. Part of a down payment, money when a car died. Several months of childcare one difficult year. Dental bills, small loans that were never really repaid. I did not keep score. Families are not accounting ledgers. If someone is struggling, you help them. The problem was that temporary help slowly became a permanent moral category. Megan needs. Claire doesn't. Then my parents retired. They stayed in the large 4-bedroom house where we grew up. Dad refused to discuss downsizing. This is our home. Mom said she wanted the grandchildren to know it. At first, they managed. Then property taxes rose. Insurance rose. Dad had medical expenses. The furnace failed. Mom called me. We're a little short this month. I sent money. Then another expense came. Then another. Eventually, I began sending them $1,000 every month. I told myself it was temporary. After a while, it became normal. Some months it was $1,200. Sometimes $1,400. If there was a major repair, I often covered part of that separately. I never asked for equity in the house. I never asked for repayment. I never connected the money to inheritance. They were my parents. I was helping them stay in the home they loved. That was all, until Sunday dinner. That night, I went home, put the roof estimate on my kitchen counter, and opened my banking records. For the first time, I added everything: monthly transfers, property tax shortfalls, the furnace, insurance deductibles, plumbing, a drainage repair. Other major household expenses I could identify clearly. The total was just over $112,000. I stared at the number. I didn't feel cheated because I had given it. I had chosen to. What hurt was how invisible it had become. My parents remembered helping me through university. They had even mentioned it during the inheritance conversation. We helped you get started. They were right. But nobody seemed to remember that for 7 years, I had helped them keep going. They remembered every time they helped me. Nobody remembered the years I had been helping them. I had never treated my help like an investment. They were the ones who turned the house into an inheritance calculation. The number also changed the way I remembered certain conversations. There had been birthdays when Dad joked that I was the family bank. I always laughed because I thought he meant I was organized. There were holidays when Mom would ask whether I could put something on my card, and she would sort it out later. Sometimes she did. Sometimes I told her not to bother. There were weekends when Megan brought the children over, and Dad would mention that something in the house needed fixing. If I asked what it cost, he would tell me. If Megan asked, he usually said, "Don't worry about it." Again, none of those moments felt sinister when they happened. That is how family patterns become difficult to recognize. They are built from ordinary decisions. The person who has more margin pays. The person who is less stressed handles the problem. The person who has always said yes gets asked first. Eventually, nobody remembers that every yes was a choice. I also remembered a conversation with Mom about 18 months earlier. She had said, "You know, one thing we never worry about with you is your future." At the time, I took it as a compliment. Now I heard the second half that had never been spoken. Because we do not worry about your future, we feel free to use more of your present. That was the part I needed to change. Not because I wanted my parents to start worrying about me. I wanted them to stop treating my stability as evidence that my resources were available without limit. I also made one rule for myself. I would not use the $112,000 as a weapon. I did not send the spreadsheet to the family group chat. I did not tell Megan she owed me half. I did not tell my parents that every future decision had to repay me first. That money was already given. If I turned it into a debt after the fact, I would be doing the same thing I was accusing everyone else of doing, changing the meaning of an old agreement because the present had become uncomfortable. The past stayed a gift. The future became a choice. That distinction kept me from becoming bitter. It also made my position harder for my family to dismiss. I was not demanding reimbursement. I was not bargaining for an inheritance. I was simply saying that one voluntary arrangement had ended. The next morning, Dad called about the roof. "Have you thought about it?" "Yes." "And I'm not paying $10,000. He went silent. "So this is retaliation." "No, it's a boundary." He laughed. "You've been helping with this house for years." "I know." "And suddenly it's not your problem?" "I'm saying I'm not going to keep treating the house as primarily my financial responsibility when you have explicitly promised its future benefit entirely to Megan." Dad snapped. "We are still alive. This is our house." "Exactly. Then you need a plan you can afford." "You can afford 10,000. I looked out my kitchen window. There it was again. "You can afford it. The financial twin of you don't need it." "Yes," I said. "I can afford it. That does not create your right to my money." He went quiet. "You are entitled to leave me nothing," I continued. "But you are not entitled to require me to finance what you have promised to someone else." He ended the call soon after. Mom called next. She said Megan had children. Megan and Daniel had less savings. Their future was less secure. I had a home, retirement savings, and options. Then she said something I still remember. "If we split everything equally, you'll put your half in an investment account and barely notice it." For Megan, this house could change her children's lives. I asked, "Do you hear what you're saying?" "What?" "I spent 20 years building security, and you've decided security is proof I deserve none." "That's not what we mean. You keep saying I don't need your money. You don't. Then you don't need mine." I did not stop the monthly support immediately. I wanted to make a decision, not stage a punishment. I reviewed my parents' actual finances with them. They were not destitute. They had retirement income, savings, and a valuable home. The problem was that the house cost more than they comfortably wanted to spend. My monthly transfer filled the gap. I told them I would continue through the end of the next month. Then it would stop. Dad said, "After 7 years?" "Yes." Mom said, "We can change the will." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what do you want?" "A budget that works without assuming my monthly income belongs in it." I offered to help them review expenses and compare options. I would still discuss genuine emergencies, but the automatic transfer was over. Dad said, "So now we have to ask permission?" "No. Now you have to ask whether I am willing to contribute instead of treating my contribution as automatic." The roof became the first test. There was guilt from another direction, too. For years, I had been the daughter who fixed things before they became crises. If Mom mentioned an insurance bill, I solved it. If Dad mentioned a repair, I asked for the estimate. If their account looked tight, I transferred money before they had to ask twice. I had trained myself into the role almost as much as they had trained me, so when the transfer stopped, I had to resist my own habits. Dad would mention a cost and then go quiet. Old me would have filled the silence with, "How much do you need?" New me asked, "What are your options?" That question felt cruel the first few times. It wasn't. It forced all of us to remember there were options besides Claire. Savings were an option. Changing spending was an option. Megan helping was an option. Selling an expensive asset was an option. The only option that had become invisible was the one where my parents adjusted their lives to match their own income. Once that became visible again, the crisis looked very different. Dad got another estimate and asked Megan and Daniel whether they could help. Megan called me furious. Dad asked us for $8,000. I didn't tell him to. We don't have that kind of money sitting around. Neither do Mom and Dad. "That's why you always helped." There it was. "Always becomes entitlement faster than anyone notices." She said, "You can afford it." I said, "That doesn't make it mine to pay." "You're punishing them because they want the house to stay with the grandchildren." "No, I'm not asking them to change the will." "Then what is your problem?" "My problem is expecting me to finance something because I don't need it while promising it to you because you do." She accused me of being jealous. I told her I did not want the house. Then I said, "If preserving it matters most to you and your children, preserving it cannot be my private responsibility." A week later, Megan called again. This time she asked, "How much have you actually been giving them?" I told her, "Between $1,000 and $1,400 most months, plus larger expenses." "For how long?" "About 7 years." She went quiet. "How much total?" "About $112,000. She gasped. "I didn't know it was that much." Then she said something she was not supposed to say. "I thought they were going to reduce it once they told you about the will." I stopped. "Once they told me?" Silence. "Megan, how long have you known?" "Claire, how long?" "About 2 years." Everything in me went still. 2 years. She had known for 2 years that my parents intended to leave her the house and almost everything else. During those same 2 years, I had kept sending money every month. Did they tell you not to tell me? Yes. Why? They said you'd be upset. I kept asking. Finally, Megan said, Mom and Dad didn't want money mixed up with the inheritance. I almost laughed. While taking my money to maintain the house you were inheriting? That's unfair. No, that is literally the arrangement. I asked whether she had ever told them they should tell me. She hesitated. I didn't think it was my place. You were comfortable knowing it was your place to receive everything. She had no answer. That was when the story changed for me. Until then, I had been dealing with favoritism. Now I was dealing with secrecy. My parents knew the information might affect my willingness to keep supporting them, so they withheld it. Dad admitted it 3 days later. I went to their house and asked directly, "Were you worried I would stop the monthly transfers if I knew?" He tried to avoid the question. I asked again. Finally, he said, "Yes." One word. Mom looked down. Dad continued, "We didn't want money connected to the inheritance." I said, "You connected them the moment you expected me to keep paying for the house. We never said helping us buys you part of the estate. I never said it did. Then what is the issue?" "The issue is that you wanted my money disconnected from the inheritance because that arrangement only worked if I didn't know the truth." Dad said I made it sound calculated. It was calculated. Mom started crying. Then Dad said, "We thought you might stop helping, and now I have. Not because they left me nothing. Because they deliberately kept information from me so I would continue a financial arrangement they were afraid I might reconsider. The automatic transfer ended the following month, and something important happened. Nothing catastrophic. Nobody lost electricity. Nobody went hungry. My parents adjusted. They used some savings for the roof. Megan and Daniel eventually contributed around $3,000. The roof got replaced, without me. Then property taxes increased again. Dad called, not to ask for money, but to ask for ideas. We reviewed the budget. The house was simply expensive. Utilities, insurance, taxes, maintenance, landscaping. They could keep it if they spent more savings every year. Dad hated that. That money is supposed to last. That's what retirement savings are for. Mom said, "We wanted to leave something for the girls." I said quietly, "You wanted to leave something for Megan." The math gave them a few choices. Spend more savings, ask Megan for more, reduce expenses, or move. When Megan heard that downsizing was being discussed, she called me. "Why are you pushing them to sell?" "I'm not. You know that house is supposed to stay in the family." "Whose family?" "You know what I mean?" "Yes, yours." She said the children loved the house. I said, if Mom and Dad can comfortably afford it, they should keep it. If they can't, they should do what gives them the best retirement. So because you're not getting it, nobody should? No, because they're alive. She went quiet. It is their house before it is anyone's inheritance. That became the point everyone had missed. We had spent so much time discussing who should receive the house after my parents died that we had stopped asking what the house should do for them while they were alive. A few months later, Dad called me. "We can change the will." "To what? 50-50. I told him I was not asking for half. He sounded confused. "I'm trying to make this fair. If you genuinely believe 50-50 is right, do it. But don't promise me money later, so I'll give you money now." He was quiet. "Make a retirement plan that works without using either daughter as your retirement account." Then I told him what I would do. Sell the house. Buy something smaller. Lower the taxes and maintenance. Keep the extra money invested. Travel. Handle medical expenses. Live. Dad said, "Then there'd be less inheritance." "Yes." He sounded stunned. "An inheritance is what remains after someone has finished living. It should not become the reason you make your life harder now." By spring, Dad was tired of the house too. There was more exterior work. A tree needed removal. Insurance rose again. My parents met with a realtor. The house was worth more than they expected. For the first time, selling looked less like failure and more like freedom. Megan cried when they decided to list it. I understood. For 2 years, she had pictured a future there. She had talked with Daniel about renovations. Her children knew they might have the house one day. She said, "I think I treated it like it was already mine." I said nothing. Then she admitted something else. "I knew you were helping Mom and Dad. I didn't know it was $112,000, but I knew you sent money every month." "Yes. I should have told them they needed to tell you." "Yes," she cried. "I didn't, because I was afraid if you stopped helping, they might have to sell." There it was, her version of the same truth. Not a secret conspiracy, just several people protecting an arrangement because it benefited them. "I think I treated Mom and Dad's future money like it was already mine," she said. "I think everybody did." Then she said, "And I treated yours like it was already theirs." That was the apology I needed. My parents sold the house that summer. They bought a smaller one-level home 15 minutes away. 2 bedrooms, a den, a small yard for Mom, and a garage for Dad. Lower taxes, newer roof, less maintenance. After the sale and purchase, they had a meaningful amount left over. Dad invested most of it conservatively. Mom replaced their old car. The following spring, they took a trip together. That was my favorite consequence of the entire story. Not Megan losing the house. Not me proving a point. My parents using their own assets while they were alive. For the first time in years, Dad stopped calling me about bills. I visited as their daughter, not their financial department. The automatic transfer never returned. I still help sometimes. If there is a genuine emergency, I decide whether I want to contribute. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. The difference is that the choice belongs to me again. My parents eventually updated their estate plan. Dad tried to tell me the details. I asked him not to. Maybe Megan and I will inherit something someday. Maybe evenly, maybe not. Maybe medical care, travel, or life will use most of it first. I hope my parents spend what they need. That was never the part I needed to win. At Sunday dinner, when Dad told Megan, "You get everything," then looked at me and said, "Nothing," I thought the story was about being valued less. And yes, that hurt. My success had become the family's explanation for why I deserved less, while also becoming their explanation for why I should contribute more. But my parents were allowed to leave me nothing. Their house was theirs. Their savings were theirs. Their will was theirs. I had no right to demand half. What nobody had considered was that my money was mine too. For years, being the responsible daughter meant carrying more bills, more emergencies, more understanding, more silence. And because I carried more, everyone assumed I required less consideration. Sunday dinner made that contradiction impossible to ignore. You get nothing. Then, can you pay $10,000 for the roof? Once those 2 sentences existed together, I understood the whole system. I do not regret helping my parents. I gave that money because I loved them. The mistake was not generosity. The mistake was allowing generosity to become automatic. Love can motivate help. It cannot erase consent. And inheritance should never become payment for support in either direction. Parents should not say, "We'll leave you more if you keep helping." Children should not say, "I'll only help if I inherit." My parents did something subtler. They wanted my money treated as love and their estate decision treated as unrelated fairness. But they knew the two were connected enough to hide the estate decision because they feared it would change my choice. That was the betrayal, the secrecy. When Dad finally said, "We thought you might stop helping," I stopped wondering whether I had imagined it. Once I knew the truth, I made a different decision, and the family did not collapse. Other adults adapted. The roof got replaced. My parents changed their budget. The house was sold. Their retirement became stronger. Megan lost the certainty of a future asset. I lost the role of automatic family financier. Mom and Dad lost a house they loved but gained financial breathing room. None of it was painless. It was still healthier. One Sunday after they moved, Mom invited Megan and me to dinner at the smaller house. Dad was talking about an upcoming trip and asked my opinion on travel insurance. I gave it. He smiled and said, "See, we still need you." Everyone went quiet for half a second. Then he added, "Your advice." Not your credit card. I laughed. So did Mom. Megan nearly choked on her drink. It was a small joke, but it told me the assumption had finally become visible. They understood. Not perfectly, but enough. My parents told my sister, "You get everything." Then they looked at me and said, "Nothing." I believed them. And once I did, everybody finally understood what nothing actually meant. It did not mean I stopped loving them. It did not mean I wanted revenge. It did not mean I demanded half. It meant the financial relationship had to become honest. Their assets were theirs. My assets were mine. Megan's future was hers to build. Mine was mine to protect. An inheritance is what remains after someone has finished living. It should never become the price of keeping a family relationship alive. And success should never become a permanent family tax. I spent most of my life being told, "You'll be fine." They were right. I was. But being fine did not mean being available for everything. It did not mean my feelings mattered less. And it definitely did not mean I had to finance a future I had deliberately been written out of. At that Sunday dinner, Dad thought saying nothing ended the inheritance conversation. Instead, it started the first honest financial conversation our family had ever had. I did not need to argue. I only needed to stop paying for the version of the story everyone else preferred.